Welcome. You're here. And that means something. Maybe you're lying down. Maybe you're watching the world dim outside your window. Maybe your mind has been full or restless or searching. Wherever you are, whatever brought you here, I honor that. This is not just a video. It's not a lecture or a sermon. It's a story, a reflection, a mirror, a quiet walk through time, thought, and being. And it begins not with gods or empires, but with a human life. If you find something here that speaks to you, some stillness, some truth, please consider staying with us. Subscribe if you like. Let this be the first of many gentle nights where ancient wisdom meets the modern soul. Now, close your eyes if you wish. Let's begin. Before the chants, before the temples, before the folded hands and incense, there was just a man. Not yet enlightened, not yet Buddha. Just a child breathing, blinking, asking the same invisible questions that all children carry beneath their skin. He was born into wealth, yes, into power. His name was Siddhartha, he who achieves his goal. A prince of the Shakya clan, son of King Shuddhodana and Queen Maya, born in a garden beneath blossoming trees as legend would tell it, walking within moments, golden-footed on lotus petals. But that is the poetry. The myth told with reverence. The truth is simpler, more human. He was born. He cried. He was held. And as all children do, he began to wonder without words at first, but with sensation. What is this life? Why are we here? And why does joy flicker like firelight so warm, yet so quick to vanish? The king, fearing a prophecy that his son would forsake royalty for the path of spirit, tried to shield him from suffering. Inside palace walls, Siddhartha was surrounded by beauty, music, comfort, food, laughter. But outside those walls, the world moved on untouched by illusion. The old aged, the sick wept, the dead were burned, and the seekers, those few strange ones who had turned their backs on everything, sat alone in forests chasing something invisible. Siddhartha saw none of this, not until he did. And when he did, the world cracked. He left the palace in secret, riding out into the dusty roads with his charioteer. There he encountered life for the first time without filters, a hunched old man wrinkled and bent, a fevered man coughing blood, a corpse lifeless on a pyre, and finally, a wandering ascetic, barefoot, silent, glowing not with health but with peace. Siddhartha asked, "Is this my future too?" And the charioteer replied, "This is the future of all who live." The curtain had lifted, and no amount of palace silk could cover what had been seen. Siddhartha returned home, but he did not return to ignorance. He held his newborn son. He looked into the eyes of his wife. He sat among servants and musicians and garlands of pleasure. But the taste had changed. He saw the trap, that everything the world offers, it also threatens to take. Not because it is cruel, but because it is impermanent. So he left. One night, as the palace slept, he stepped through its gates with nothing but a robe and a vow. He left behind title, privilege, wealth, comfort, family, not from coldness, but from a burning compassion to understand what no luxury could teach him, what ends suffering, what remains when all things fall away. Is there a way to live not in fear of death, but in freedom from it? This was not the beginning of a religion. It was the beginning of a search every one of us has felt in moments of stillness, of grief, of awe. That search, yours, mine, was once embodied in one human being, a prince turned seeker, a man who had everything and walked away from it all. In the sections ahead, We will follow him not just as biography, but as metaphor. Because Siddhartha's journey is also our own. His doubts are ours. His hunger for meaning, his fear of illusion, his longing for something real, and ultimately his awakening. But for now, he walks beneath the moon alone in the forest, his princely sandals replaced by naked feet, his back turned to the city of gold, his eyes set toward the silence of trees. No chants follow him yet, no disciples, just the questions, and a willingness to find their answer. The forest was not a metaphor. It was not a place of poetry or abstraction. It was dense, biting alive. The nights were cold. The days were unforgiving. And yet, Siddhartha walked barefoot alone, no longer a prince, not yet a sage. What does it mean to walk away from everything? Not just physically, but inwardly. To leave behind the self that the world carved into you, your name, your status, your story, and to walk into a silence where nothing remains but the echo of your own mind. For most of us, such emptiness would be unbearable. But Siddhartha sought it, craved it, trusted it. He believed not blindly, but deeply, that somewhere in the stillness, beyond identity, beyond desire, beyond illusion, there was something real, something unshakable. He did not know yet that it would not be something to gain, but something to lose. That awakening is not an addition to the self, but the collapse of self entirely. He studied first with two renowned teachers of the day, Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta, masters of deep meditation. Skilled in the jhanas, the formless absorptions, the heights of concentrated bliss. Under their guidance, Siddhartha learned to enter profound states of inner stillness dimensions beyond thought, beyond sensation. He tasted peace. He touched transcendence. But when he returned from meditation, the old questions remained. Suffering still existed. Death still loomed. And craving the root of all disquiet remained untouched. These were not escapes he was seeking, not spiritual highs. He was looking for something final, something free. And so, respectfully, he left those teachers behind. Next, he turned to austerity, extreme discipline, the path of denial. If pleasure was a trap, then pain might be the key. If indulgence leads to illusion, perhaps suffering could strip it away. And so he fasted. He held his breath until his veins throbbed. He exposed himself to the elements. He stood still until his legs buckled. He meditated without movement for hours, then days. He consumed so little that his bones pressed against his skin like twigs against paper. At one point, it said he touched his belly and felt his spine. And still, no awakening. What he learned in that forest, starving, trembling, shaking with the effort to transcend, is something so few spiritual traditions dare to admit. That extremes, whether of pleasure or pain, are distractions. That clinging to asceticism is no different than clinging to indulgence. Both are rooted in ego. Both are attempts to control life rather than understand it. Both are built on the illusion that salvation lies somewhere else through more doing, more effort, more striving. Siddhartha had reached the end of the path. He had exhausted the known routes. And in that exhaustion, something shifted. He sat beside the Naranjara River gaunt and faint, close to death. And a girl appeared, Sujata, a villager, a stranger, not a mystic, not a sage. She offered him a bowl of rice and milk, a small act of kindness, a moment of human connection. And Siddhartha, for the first time in years, accepted nourishment, not just of the body, but of the truth he had been too proud to see. That suffering is not the way. that cruelty to the body is not liberation, that chasing extremes is just another form of grasping. And so he bathed, he dressed, he ate. His 5 companions, fellow ascetics, saw this and turned away in disgust. To them, he had given up, but in truth, he had just begun. That night, Siddhartha sat beneath a large fig tree, later known as the Bodhi tree, not to fast, not to torture himself, but to see, to truly see. He sat cross-legged and made a vow not to rise until he understood, even if it took his final breath. And so the mind that had once belonged to a prince, then an ascetic, now became a mirror. He turned inward, not to find something new, but to unlearn everything false. He examined every thought, every sensation, every ripple of craving fear, memory identity. What is this I that suffers? Where is it located? Can it be touched? Or is it only a habit? A mirage? Hour by hour, as the night deepened, so did his seeing. He saw his past lives, not as stories, but as chains. Countless births, countless deaths, joy, sorrow, war, peace, over and over and over. He saw karma not as reward or punishment, but as cause and effect. Thoughts leading to actions, actions leading to patterns, patterns forming destiny. He saw the cycle of samsara not as myth, but as the architecture of suffering itself. And he saw the way out, a path, not written in stone, but in insight. As dawn approached, the final challenge came. The voice of Mara, the personification of ego illusion and death, whispered, "Who do you think you are to break free? What makes you special? This enlightenment? Who will witness it?" And in response, Siddhartha touched the earth, not to call gods or angels, but to call the ground itself the silent witness of all things. And the earth trembled in answer. In that moment, Siddhartha awoke, not in the way we awaken from sleep, but in the way one awakens from a lifetime of misidentification. He saw, with perfect clarity, that all things are impermanent. That suffering is born of attachment. That self is not a thing but a process. That liberation is not later, it is now. If one sees clearly, he had become the Buddha, the awakened one. But he did not celebrate. He did not rise and preach. He simply sat, smiling, breathing, free. The silence between knowing and speaking. The Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree for 7 days, not in rapture, not in proclamation, but in stillness. No audience, no temple, no disciples, just the soft hum of dawn, light through leaves, just the breathing of earth, just the quiet flowering of clarity within a human mind that no longer clung to itself. He had crossed the river, not the river of water, but the river of becoming, the turbulent stream of fear, desire, identity. And now he rested not on the other side, but outside the need for sides altogether. And yet, he said nothing, because the first impulse of a truly awakened being is not to teach, but to wonder if teaching is even possible. What can you say to a world that is addicted to the very illusions it suffers from? How do you explain to a drowning man that the water he clutches for safety is what's pulling him under? The Buddha understood this dilemma. He saw the nature of truth, subtle, quiet, simple, and yet devastating to the ego. He saw the nature of people conditioned proud, afraid. He saw that the path requires more than knowledge, it requires willingness. And he hesitated. This is a moment that often passes too quickly in retellings. But it is sacred, because in it we see not a God speaking from a mountaintop, but a man deeply human, weighing the value of his insight against the silence of a world unready. Should he speak? Would anyone listen? And if they did, would they understand? These were not doubts of ego. They were doubts born of compassion. He had no desire to convert, no ambition to build a religion. He wanted only to help. But help to be real must land in a heart that is open, and most hearts are armored with identity. Then, as the story goes, a being of light, Brahma Sahampati, descended from the heavens, not to praise, but to plead. Please, he said, there are those with but little dust in their eyes. They will understand. They are waiting. And the Buddha, with that vast gaze that sees beyond time, saw that it was true. Some would mock, some would fear, some would cling more tightly to illusion, but some would listen, some would hear, and that was enough. So the Buddha stood, the Bodhi tree at his back, the world in front. He walked not toward glory, but toward service. He sought no cathedral. He carried no scripture. He simply began to walk barefoot, quiet with the truth, held gently in his heart like a lamp in the dark. His first destination was Sarnath, where 5 former companions, ascetics, who had once practiced with him, still lived. They had left him when he abandoned self-torture. To them, he had given up the path. But as he approached, something had changed. They saw him, and they felt it. A calm beyond words. A presence beyond personality. At first, they resolved not to greet him. But before he spoke, before he gestured, something in their own minds began to quiet. They offered him a seat. He sat before them, not as Siddhartha, not as a prince, not even as a teacher, but as one who had seen. And for the first time, the Buddha gave voice to the Dharma, not as commandment, not as revelation, but as insight earned, tested, lived. He spoke of suffering, dukkha, not as a curse, but as a reality. He spoke of craving, tanha, as its root, of cessation, nibbana, as its possibility, and of the path, eightfold and noble, as its unfolding. It was not a creed to memorize. It was a mirror to look into. The Buddha taught not what to believe, but what to observe. The 4 noble truths were not promises. They were maps. And the noble eightfold path was not a ladder to climb, but a way to walk right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Each was a refinement of perception, each a deepening of responsibility, each a step not forward, but inward toward clarity, toward stillness, toward freedom. The 5 ascetics listened, and in that listening, something inside them softened. The effort dropped, the clinging loosened, and in time, they too began to awaken. They became the first sangha, a community of seekers who would not follow but practice. The Buddha made no demands. He offered no threats. He gave people a question: do you want to see? And if they said yes, he offered a path not paved, not easy, but real. And so the Dharma entered the world, not with a trumpet, but with a breath, not with conquest, but with presence. And from this moment, this quiet teaching in a deer park, a new way of being began to ripple outward, a way rooted not in belief, but in attention, not in identity, but in awareness, not in heaven, but in here. In the next section, we follow the Buddha deeper into the world, not as a prophet in isolation, but as a wanderer among kings, beggars, lovers, and enemies. We watch as his teachings challenge power, unsettle certainty, and awaken hearts. Among kings and beggars, the Buddha did not settle. He did not build temples or courts. He did not seek to be enshrined, adored, or followed for the sake of name. He walked, village to village, forest to city, palace to prison. He walked not to escape the world, but to meet it fully, to enter its wounds, its longings, its questions. The Dharma was not meant for quiet corners of silence alone. It was meant for every breath, every step, every tear of human life. So he walked, and in his walking, the world met something it had never seen before: a man without want, a sage without pride, a teacher who taught without authority, who listened more than he spoke, and who held no one above or below. He taught kings and beggars with the same gaze. To the one he spoke of letting go of power, to the other of letting go of despair. He did not ask people to become like him. He asked them to see like him. One of the first rulers to cross his path was King Bimbisara of Magadha, a powerful monarch, wealthy, sophisticated, yet quietly burdened. Bimbisara had heard whispers of this serene wanderer who walked like he had nothing to prove. He invited the Buddha to his palace, and what unfolded there was not the conversion of a king, but the undoing of a worldview. The Buddha refused luxury. He spoke in simple tones, and when the king asked what kind of wealth the Buddha possessed, he smiled gently and said, "I own nothing, yet I sleep in peace. You own everything, and yet you fear its loss." The words cut deeper than flattery ever could. The king was not offended. He was awakened, not fully, but enough to glimpse the weight he carried. He bowed not out of reverence, but recognition. And from that day on, he supported the Buddha's journey, not as a disciple, but as a fellow human learning to release. Elsewhere, the Buddha met the poor, the untouchable, the outcast. He entered the homes of butchers, prostitutes, grieving mothers, and lonely old men. He walked where priests would not walk. He listened where judges would not hear. To a prostitute, he said, "Your worth is not in how others see you, but in how clearly you see yourself." To a grieving mother holding the body of her dead son, he said, "Find me a home that has not known death, and I will bring your child back." She searched, house to house, village to village, but every door opened with sorrow. Every threshold had known loss. And at last, she returned and laid her child at the Buddha's feet, not in bitterness, but in understanding. This is how he taught: through seeing, through direct experience, through truths that shattered the need for belief. He did not give comfort in the traditional sense. He gave clarity, and from clarity, peace arose like dawn after a long storm. He challenged Brahmins, those born into privileged guardians of ritual and caste. They asked him, "By what birth are you holy?" And he answered, "Not birth, but action makes one noble. Not status, but conduct." This was heresy. To many, it was threatening, but it was also liberating. To the enslaved, to the invisible, to the ones always told they were less. The Buddha spoke the unspeakable, that dignity is not inherited. It is cultivated. That awakening is not reserved. It is possible for all. He met the violent, the cruel, the angry. He met a warrior named Angulimala, whose name meant garland of fingers, a murderer who had taken 99 lives and sought his 100th. When he saw the Buddha walking calmly toward him, Angulimala charged with blade in hand. But no matter how fast he ran, the Buddha always remained just out of reach. "Stop," the killer shouted. The Buddha turned, not fleeing, not flinching, and replied, "I have stopped Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." In that instant, something broke. Not in fear, not in guilt, but in awareness. Angulimala dropped his weapon. He fell to his knees, and later, he took robes not to escape punishment, but to devote his life to seeing clearly. He became a monk. The Buddha taught no one was beyond redemption, not because all sins are erased, but because insight can begin in any moment. Every mind is trainable. Every heart can unlearn. Even the most twisted branches can reach toward light. But that light the Buddha reminded people was not outside, not in gods, not in saviors, not in heaven. It was in attention, in how you listen, in how you respond, in whether you cling or let go. He didn't offer salvation. He offered a mirror. Some looked and turned away, but others quietly, slowly began to see. The Buddha's reputation grew, not because he sought it, but because the truth resonates. It does not need advertisement. It speaks through stillness, through kindness, through freedom that can be felt even in a single sentence. And as he walked, more gathered around him, not worshippers, but students, monks, nuns, lay people, children, elders, merchants, hermits, lovers, outcasts. They didn't follow a man. They followed a way. And still he walked, not to lead, but to keep walking, to live the teaching, not just speak it. In the next section, we follow the Buddha into conflict not with armies or weapons, but with ideas. We watch how his words began to challenge the very foundations of society, hierarchy, dogma, even religion itself. The fire of ideas. The Buddha's footsteps were soft, but the echoes they left behind grew louder with each passing day. He had no army, no scriptures etched in gold, no threat of punishment, nor promise of paradise. And yet his words began to stir the bones of ancient institutions. Not because they were violent, but because they were true. And the truth, when it moves freely, does not just awaken hearts, it disrupts systems. In the kingdoms of his time, hierarchy was law. From the towering palaces of Brahmins to the dusty streets of laborers, birth determined one's destiny. To question that was to question the very fabric of society. And yet that's exactly what the Buddha did. He did not declare war on the caste system. He simply ignored it. In his sangha, a street sweeper could sit beside a prince. An untouchable could teach a merchant. A woman could challenge a man with wisdom sharpened by insight. What mattered was not lineage, but awakening. This was radical. But the Buddha never raised his voice. He didn't need to. One sentence from him could unravel centuries of dogma. Because his voice wasn't just heard, it was felt. People recognized their own truths in his words, and that recognition made them bold. They began to question, why should I be lesser? Why must I perform rituals to please a God I cannot see? Why must my suffering be accepted as karma when I have the power to understand it? These weren't just spiritual reflections. They were philosophical revolutions. And so the Buddha's teaching became a fire not to destroy, but to purify. It burned not temples, but illusions. Not laws, but ignorance. He taught that the rituals performed for merit were empty without intention. That chanting sacred verses meant nothing if one's heart was still full of craving and pride. To many Brahmins, this was a threat. To them, religion was a ladder with them at the top. But the Buddha took that ladder and gently laid it flat. No hierarchy, just a path. He didn't seek to dismantle belief. He invited people to investigate it. Don't believe what I say. Because I say it, he told them. Test it in your own life. Just as a goldsmith tests gold. This was not dogma. It was method. People weren't used to that. They were used to being told, to being commanded. But the Buddha did not command. He described. He described how suffering begins, how the mind clings, how anger arises, how ignorance hardens into belief, and then he described how it ends. He spoke often of dependent origination, a subtle, profound teaching. Nothing arises on its own. Everything is caused. Everything is connected. Suffering arises because conditions allow it. Change the conditions, and the suffering fades. It was not magic. It was cause and effect applied to the human experience. It meant no one was doomed. Not by birth, not by fate, not even by karma. Because karma, as he taught it, was not destiny. It was simply action. What you do now, what you think now, say now. Intend now matters. It shapes not just your future, but your present. This dismantled centuries of fatalism. It gave people agency, responsibility, hope, and it unsettled those who had power because of inherited privilege. To challenge kings was dangerous, to challenge priests even more so. But the Buddha did not attack. He listened. And in listening, he revealed people to themselves. Some tried to trap him in debate. They asked about gods, souls, creation, the afterlife. He often answered with silence. Not because he did not know, but because he knew those questions were not the real questions. He once said, "Imagine a man shot with a poisoned arrow. Should he refuse the doctor until he knows who made the arrow, what wood it's from, and which direction it came, or should he ask for the cure?" That was his method. Not metaphysics, not speculation, just liberation. Here, now. If your house is on fire, he would say, don't argue about its design. Find the door. And yet, the more people found that door, the more others tried to close it. He was accused of undermining tradition, of weakening social order, of leading people astray. Even some of his early followers began to twist his words into doctrine. They wanted certainty, fixed truths, something they could grasp. But the Buddha always returned to this: let go. Let go of views. Let go of attachments. Let go even of the Dharma once it has served its purpose. He compared his teaching to a raft of tool to cross the river. Once on the other side, don't carry it on your back. Let it go. This was not religion as the world knew it. This was something else, something quieter, something more dangerous, because it made people free. And freedom, true freedom, threatens those who benefit from control. But the Buddha was not afraid. He had walked through fire, the fire of craving of illusion of self. And on the other side, there was no one left to control or be controlled. Only awareness, only clarity, only compassion. In the next section, we witness how that compassion begins to take new form, not in words alone, but in the way he builds a community, one that welcomes not just the wise, but the weary. Not just men, but women, a radical act in his time, and one that would challenge even his closest disciples. The circle opens, welcoming the forgotten. The Buddha never wanted followers. He wanted practitioners. He didn't call people to him. He simply walked, and those who felt something stir inside them walked with him. His sangha grew, not as an organization, but as a rhythm, a quiet harmony of those who sought clarity over comfort, understanding over identity. They were not saints, not scholars, just human beings. Some came from wealth, others from nothing. Some were young, some were near death, some were bold, others broken. But all came with one question: is there another way to live? And the Buddha answered not with promises, but with a path. Yet as the sangha took form, a subtle question began to rise, not from outside, but from within. A question of inclusion, a question that would test the very heart of what it meant to walk the path. What about women? In the India of his time, women were not just excluded from spiritual life, they were bound by it. Their worth was measured by marriage, their voice muffled by tradition, their access to the sacred limited by gender. Even among his earliest disciples, there was hesitation, doubt, fear. Would the inclusion of women weaken the sangha? Would it break social norms beyond repair? Would it be too radical too soon? And at first, even the Buddha hesitated, not from belief in inequality, but from awareness of the backlash inclusion could provoke. He saw the danger, the resistance, the cost. But the pressure grew, not through anger, but through love. From within the palace he had once called home came a voice that could not be ignored: Mahapajapati Gautama. His stepmother, the woman who had raised him after Queen Maya died. She had followed him. She had shaved her head. She had walked hundreds of miles with other women seeking refuge, and she stood before him not as a queen, but as a seeker. She asked not for favor, but for the right to practice. 3 times she asked. 3 times he declined, not out of disrespect, but out of concern. And then something shifted. The Buddha saw not only her determination, but her wisdom. He saw that her understanding was already deep, that her presence was already an example, that her inclusion was not an indulgence, it was a mirror of the Dharma itself. If suffering is universal, if awakening is possible for all, then how can the path be denied to half the world? And so he opened the sangha to women. This was not symbolic. It was structural. It redefined who could walk the path and who could teach it. The Bhikkhuna Sangha, the community of ordained women, was born. And with it came teachers, thinkers, meditators, and voices that would echo across centuries. Women like Kisa Gautam, who found the Dharma after losing her child and searching for a mustard seed from a house untouched by death. She returned empty-handed, but full of insight. Grief had not left her, but it had been transformed. She became a nun, a teacher, a symbol of how suffering, when understood, becomes the soil of wisdom. Not all accepted this change. There were murmurs in the sangha. Even Ananda, the Buddha's closest attendant and most compassionate disciple, struggled with the resistance from others. But the Buddha stood firm. He did not measure worth by robes or lineage. He measured by seeing, by presence, by practice, by realization. And in doing so, he offered something rare, not just freedom from suffering, but freedom from exclusion. This move, so quiet in its moment, would resonate through centuries. It challenged every hierarchy. It questioned every tradition that placed power above wisdom. It declared that the Dharma, to be real, must belong to everyone, not in theory, in practice. And yet the Buddha did not preach equality as ideology. He simply lived it. He sat with the poor. He dined with the untouchable. He ordained the neglected. He empowered the dismissed. And he taught that the self, that fragile, clinging identity, is the real illusion. Not man, not woman, not high, not low, just process, just consciousness, arising and passing breath by breath. This was not a rejection of humanity. It was its embrace. When you no longer identify with form, you are free to love it, not because it defines you, but because it no longer limits you. This is why the Buddha's gaze was so powerful. He looked through you not in judgment, but in compassion. He didn't see your story. He saw your capacity to awaken, to release, to return to what was always there. And so, the sangha grew not by conquest, not by doctrine, but by inclusion. Not because everyone agreed, but because everyone was welcome. And with each new voice, each nun, each novice, each seeker, the Dharma unfolded like a lotus petal after petal from the mud toward the sky. In the next section, we travel with the Buddha as he nears the final decades of his life, not with weariness, but with a clarity that deepens. We'll witness how he begins to prepare others to carry the flame and what it means to let go even of your role as teacher. Preparing to let go. The Buddha had never claimed to be a savior. He was a guide, a pointer, a mirror for the truth that already lives inside all of us. And as the years passed, his message did not change, it deepened. His steps slowed, not from exhaustion, but from precision. His words became simpler, clearer, quieter. Not because he grew uncertain, but because certainty had been replaced by direct seeing. The sangha had grown now, thousands strong. Disciples walked in his footsteps. Noble ones had awakened. Some were wise, others still clinging. But the wheel of Dharma had been set in motion. The Buddha saw what few teachers can bear to see. His work was almost done, and so he began to prepare, not for death, but for release, for the handover, for the letting go that every wise guide must eventually choose. One of the first signs came in his conversations with Ananda. Ananda, the cousin and devoted attendant, had walked with the Buddha for decades. He remembered every word, every gesture. He adored the master, not in idolatry, but in reverence. And yet, he still did not fully see. The Buddha knew this, and in quiet, patient ways, he began to lead Ananda, not just in service, but in awakening. You have heard much, the Buddha told him. But hearing is not the same as knowing, and knowing is not the same as being free. It wasn't a scolding, it was an invitation. Around this time, the Buddha also began to delegate. He appointed Mahakassapa, a monk of great discipline and silent strength, as one who could hold the sangha together after his passing. Others, too, were encouraged to step forward. The path was no longer his to walk alone. It had become a river, and he its headwater. He returned to familiar places, towns where he had once taught forests, where he had meditated villages, where children had become monks, and elders had passed away. He saw impermanence everywhere, and he smiled at it. He did not grieve the loss of form. He recognized its necessity. What arises must pass. What is born must die. But the Dharma, he said, is not born. It is seen. And what is seen clearly can never be lost. He revisited the city of Kapilavastu, where he had once lived as a prince. The palace was no longer his. The streets were changed. Some recognized him. Many did not. He visited his former wife, Yasodhara, now a nun, now a teacher. They did not speak of the past in regret. They bowed in mutual respect. Two lives once bound in attachment, now meeting in freedom. He embraced Rahula, his son no longer a boy, but a monk, and he offered him not approval, but truth. Live with mindfulness, he said. Guard your thoughts, like a warrior guards a flame in the wind. These were not farewells. They were releases. Each one a thread untied. Each one a roll set gently down. because even the teacher must one day become the teaching itself and then vanish. Word began to spread. Whispers moved through the sangha like wind through leaves. Will he leave soon? Who will lead us? What will happen when he's gone? Ananda asked directly. And the Buddha answered, the Dharma will be your guide, not me, not a person, but the path itself. This was not a burden. It was the greatest gift. Because a path dependent on a personality will crumble, but a path rooted in insight will thrive long after its author is gone. The Buddha reminded his disciples, be a lamp unto yourselves, be islands unto yourselves. Rely on no external refuge, rely on the Dharma. Live it, embody it. That is how you honor the Tathagata. He did not demand worship, he demanded clarity. And this clarity extended to the sangha itself. He challenged their attachments, not just to ego, but to tradition. Not just to him, but to the very form of Buddhism they had begun to build. Do not cling, he said even to the Dharma. It is a raft to cross the river. Once you've crossed, let it go. This is the paradox of wisdom. The more deeply you see, the more lightly you hold. The more completely you understand, the less you need to possess. And so, the Buddha, in preparing to let go of life, was also teaching the Sangha to let go of him, not in sorrow, but in stillness, not in absence, but in understanding. One evening, while resting beneath a grove of trees, he spoke again to Ananda, I have taught all I know. I have held nothing back. If any among you remains confused, let them ask now. But no one did. There was no grand secret waiting, no hidden teaching to be unveiled. What he had shared was enough. What he had lived was enough. And soon, that would have to be enough. In the next section, we walk with the Buddha. Through his final journey, a simple path through humble villages, where his steps become softer and his presence begins to shift from teacher to legacy. The final journey begins. He walked slower now, not because he was weary of the road, but because he knew he was nearing its end. And when one walks toward death with clear eyes, every step becomes deliberate. Every breath a teaching, every silence sacred. The Buddha did not announce that he was dying. He did not burden his disciples with fear or sentiment. He simply continued to walk village to village under moonlight and over dust, as he always had. But those closest to him began to feel it. There was a subtle shift, not in his strength, which remained steady, but in the way he lingered at each town. The way his gaze paused on trees, on rivers, on faces that had grown older beside him. He was not holding on. He was saying goodbye, not with words, but with presence. One of the last towns he would visit was Vesalo, a place he had returned to many times. There, he gave what would later be known as his last sermon, though to him, it was simply another moment of truth. He spoke again of impermanence, not as tragedy, but as nature. He reminded his followers that all compounded things are destined to break apart. He told them, all things that arise will pass away. Practice diligently. Do not be careless. There was no drama in his voice, no trembling, only stillness. This, too, was part of the path. From Vesala, he turned toward Kusinara, a small village, simple and quiet. Along the way, he stopped at rivers, rested beneath trees, and spoke to whoever approached. He met a blacksmith named Kunda, who, unaware of the significance of the meal he offered, invited the Buddha to his home. The Buddha accepted ate and later grew ill. Was it food poisoning? Historians may speculate. But the Buddha did not blame. He did not resist. He simply accepted it, another condition, another form changing into another. Even in illness, he turned his experience into teaching. He called Ananda and said, "Kunda has gained great merit. Tell him not to grieve." The last offering to a fully awakened one before parinirvana is a noble deed. He turned poison into purity. He turned suffering into insight. Because that's what the awakened do. As he neared Kusinara, he asked Ananda to prepare a resting place between two sal trees. They laid out a simple robe. He lay on his right side, the lion's posture, eyes half closed, body calm. The sal trees bloomed out of season, as if the earth itself bowed in witness. Disciples gathered silently weeping. Others rushed from nearby villages, hoping for one last glance, one last word. Some begged him to stay. Some asked for a miracle. And the Buddha, always compassionate but always honest, said, "What need is there for sorrow? Everything that is dear will one day separate. This body is like an old cart, held together by string. It is time to lay it down." But even in that moment, he did not speak of death. He spoke of awakening. "Be a lamp unto yourselves," he repeated. "Take refuge in the Dharma, not in me." And then he turned to Ananda, whose eyes were full of quiet devastation. "You have served me with love beyond duty," the Buddha said. He did not bless him with power. He did not name him successor. He offered instead something more intimate: gratitude. Even enlightened ones feel gratitude. Because even when the self dissolves, the heart remains soft. As the sun dipped low, the Buddha gave his final teaching, not with flourish, not with thunder, but with precision. All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently. These were his last words. And then, with a breath that felt more like release than effort, he passed into parinirvana, the final complete cessation beyond rebirth, beyond form. The body rested. The light remained. There was no wailing in the heavens, no cosmic fanfare, just silence. And then, birdsong. The world continued. And that too was the teaching. His body was cremated with reverence, ashes placed in relics, stupas built not as tombs, but as reminders that truth once seen never dies, that clarity once lit lights countless others. And so the Buddha walked on, not in body, but in Dharma, in practice. In every moment, someone stops, breathes, and chooses to see. But this is not the end of the story. Because after the Buddha's passing, a new question arose. What do we do now? In the next section, we follow the sangha as it faces its greatest test: how to preserve the teachings without turning them into chains, how to hold memory without distorting truth. After the silence, preserving the Dharma. When a light as bright as the Buddha's fades from the world, the shadow it leaves is both grief and uncertainty. The sangha had never known life without him. Every question had found its answer in his gaze, every confusion its clarity in his silence. Now there was no voice to consult, no feet to follow, no smile to anchor the restless minds. There was only the path, and now they had to walk it without him. For many, the days following his parinirvana were drenched in mourning. Even Ananda, the one closest to the Buddha, wept not in doubt of the teaching, but in the quiet sorrow that rises when a presence so steady is suddenly gone. He had not yet attained full awakening. And now the Master was no longer there to guide him. But the Buddha had prepared them for this. He had told them over and over, "Do not depend on me. Depend on the Dharma. Depend on your own clear seeing." And so in the silence that followed the fire of his cremation, a new flame had to be kindled this time, not in one person, but in a community. The elders of the sangha gathered in Rajagaha, led by Mahakassapa, a monk known not for eloquence, but for his quiet rigor. He had felt the pulse of the Buddha's vision, not in words, but in embodiment. And he knew if the Dharma was to survive, it had to be preserved with integrity, not as scripture alone, but as living transmission. They called it the First Council, a gathering to recall, recite, and organize the teachings. But this was not mere administration. It was an act of devotion, of remembrance, of stewardship. Ananda was called to recite the Buddha's discourses. He had not written them down, nothing had been. Everything was preserved through memory tone, rhythm repetition. Ananda had listened to every sermon. He had stood beside the Buddha through rain and dust. He had witnessed awakenings, confessions, debates, silences. And now he was asked to speak them back, word for word, breath for breath. But there was a problem. Ananda was not yet an arahant. He had not attained liberation. And tradition dictated that only those who had seen for themselves, who had realized the Dharma fully, could take part in transmitting it. So the night before the council, Ananda sat alone, not in panic, but in profound resolve. He turned inward, just as the Buddha had done. He sat not to remember, but to let go of his dependence, to let go of identity, of memory, of grief. And before the dawn, he awakened, not through effort alone, but through surrender, through the wisdom that arises when nothing is clung to. At the council, Ananda stood, and with the simplicity of rain falling on leaves, he began, "Thus have I heard." It was not a declaration of authority. It was a gesture of humility. He did not say, "Thus it is." He said, "Thus have I heard." He offered not dogma, but testimony. And from his voice, the suttas, the Buddha's discourses, were spoken and remembered. They were arranged not by subject, but by the intimacy of their delivery, collected into what would later become the Sutta Pitaka, the basket of teachings. Alongside this, the Vinaya Pitaka, the monastic code, was also recited and recorded. It was not a list of punishments. It was a guide to living in alignment, a structure not of control, but of simplicity, discipline, harmony. Together, these formed the early heart of the Tipitaka, the three baskets of the Dharma. Later would come the Abhidhamma, deep philosophical analysis. But here in this first council, the emphasis was clear. Preserve the root. Keep the teaching alive, but do not freeze it into stone. Still, tensions arose. Not all monks agreed. Interpretations differed. Even then, the seeds of sectarianism stirred. How to balance structure with freedom. How to avoid turning the Dharma into dogma. The Buddha had warned of this. He had said, "Cling not even to the truth. Let the raft go once you have crossed the river." But human nature is slow to loosen its grip. And so across time, Buddhism would begin to branch into schools, into languages, into philosophies, each holding a piece of the original jewel refracted through culture, need, and mind. Some would emphasize meditation, others devotion, some logic and philosophy, others compassion and art. But at the center of it all remained the same pulse. See clearly. Let go. Awaken. And help others do the same. The Dharma had become a living tradition. Not because it was written, but because it was practiced. And even now, centuries later, when you close your eyes and watch your breath, when you catch a thought before it becomes craving, when you see impermanence and choose peace instead of panic, you are continuing that transmission. In the next section, we'll begin exploring the core teachings themselves, not as historical artifacts, but as inner tools. Starting with the foundational insight of suffering, what it really means, why it matters, and why, contrary to misconception, it is the gateway to liberation. Understanding suffering. The first noble truth. Before the Buddha spoke of peace, he spoke of suffering. Before he promised liberation, he pointed to the wound. Before he revealed the path, he asked us to turn inward and look without flinching. This was not cruelty. It was compassion in its purest form. Because to heal, one must first acknowledge pain. To wake up, one must first admit they are asleep. And so the first noble truth. There is suffering, in Pali dukkha. But this word dukkha means more than physical pain, more than sorrow. It speaks of the pervasive unease woven through the fabric of ordinary life, a subtle restlessness, a sense that nothing truly holds, that pleasure slips, that identity shifts, that certainty vanishes, just as we begin to trust it. People often misunderstand this teaching. They hear life is suffering and feel it is pessimistic. But the Buddha was not pessimistic. He was realistic. He did not say only suffering exists. He said, there is suffering. And then he asked, what is its cause? What is its nature? And how can it end? He pointed out that suffering arises in three forms: obvious pain, illness, injury, death, grief loss, change-based suffering, when joy ends, when moments pass, when things decay, suffering from conditioned existence, the deep unease that comes from trying to make permanent what is not, trying to find self where there is only process. This last form is the most profound. It's not about tragedy. It's about illusion. The illusion that I am a fixed, separate being. The illusion that lasting happiness can be found in things that change. The illusion that control is possible in a world built on impermanence. Think of the moments when suffering quietly appears. A relationship begins to drift. A body starts to age. A possession breaks. A plan unravels. A compliment is not repeated. A silence is not filled. We feel frustration, anxiety, grief, not just because of the event, but because we expected it to be otherwise. We believed we could hold the wave. But the wave never stops moving. This is dukkha, not as punishment, but as a mirror of how we live in opposition to reality. But the Buddha did not stop there. He said, this suffering is to be understood, not denied, not escaped, not numbed, but understood deeply, intimately, as one would study a map before a journey. To understand suffering is to begin unbinding it. And here's the paradox. Suffering becomes more painful when we resist it. Pain by itself is part of life. But clinging to the idea that pain should not exist, that's where anguish begins. We want love to stay. We want health to last. We want others to be predictable. We want life to fit the shape of our desire. And so we suffer, not just because of life, but because of our relationship to it. This is why the first noble truth is not depressing. It is liberating, because it breaks the spell. It shows us that suffering isn't just bad luck. It is part of the machinery of existence as long as we cling, resist, grasp. And if suffering is constructed, it can be deconstructed. The Buddha often used the image of a man struck by an arrow. If struck once, he suffers pain. But if upon being struck, he begins to scream, to imagine future pain, to curse the sky, to relive old wounds, that is the second arrow. The first arrow is inevitable. The second is optional. We shoot it at ourselves. Understanding dukkha means learning to stop firing that second arrow. But let's be honest, this truth is not easy to accept. It asks us to sit with discomfort, to to see the stories we've told ourselves, to notice the grasping we call normal, to question the pursuit of endless pleasure. And yet this is the beginning of freedom. Because when you name the suffering, when you see its texture, its origin, its movement, it no longer owns you. The first noble truth invites us to see without shrinking back. It says, yes, suffering exists, and you don't need to run. You can meet it. You can study it. And in time, you can go beyond it. This is not despair. This is the threshold of awakening, because what comes next is the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. To name the flame is one thing. To find its fuel, that's where transformation begins. In the next section, we explore that cause not as theory, but as a pattern we live every day. A pattern called craving or tanha. We'll see how it drives us, defines us, and how by understanding it, we begin to loosen its grip. The root beneath the flame. Craving. The first noble truth points to suffering, but the Buddha did not stop there. He was not content to diagnose pain. He wanted to uncover its cause, not in the stars, not in fate, not in gods, but right here in the heart of human experience. And what he found was something startlingly simple. Suffering arises because we crave. This is the second noble truth. The word the Buddha used was tanha, often translated as craving, but it goes deeper than that. It's not just desire. It's not merely wanting. It's a grasping born from a sense of lack, an inner thirst that reaches outward, a reflex that says, I need this to be complete, to be safe, to be real. It hides behind every longing, behind every rush of excitement, behind every fear of loss. It's not the thing we want that causes pain. It's the idea that we must have it to be whole. There are three primary forms of this craving. Craving for pleasure, kama tanha. The chase for sensory delight, comfort, stimulation. Craving for becoming bhava tanha. The desire to become something, to be someone, to exist in a specific identity. Craving for non-existence, vibhava tanha. The desire to escape, to end, to numb out of fear or despair. Together, they spin the wheel of suffering. They shape our decisions, our reactions, our lives. Think about it. You see something beautiful, and the mind says, mine. You feel success, and the mind whispers, hold on. You sense rejection, and the mind screams, erase it. Erase me. Craving doesn't care about content. It's a process, a movement toward control. But the truth is, the world doesn't bend to our control. And so the more we crave, the more we suffer. The Buddha never said desire was evil. He said unexamined craving is a trap. There is a difference. Wanting to eat when hungry is natural, but needing gourmet perfection to feel okay, that's craving. Loving someone is human, but needing their constant affirmation to feel worthy, that's craving. Wanting peace is noble, but resenting all discomfort, that too is craving. It's subtle. It hides beneath the surface of even our most noble goals. You sit to meditate, hoping for stillness. 10 minutes in the mind wanders. Frustration arises. Why? Because the mind wanted something. Even in spirituality, craving slips in, the craving to be awakened, to feel pure, to be seen as wise. The path itself becomes poisoned by the very thing it's meant to cure. The Buddha saw this in his own journey. When he fasted to the edge of death, when he pursued visions and ecstasies, he realized even that was craving, a subtler form, but craving nonetheless. And so he taught not renunciation for its own sake, but freedom from dependence. Enjoy what comes, but don't cling. Grieve what goes, but don't collapse. Live with intention, but let go of the illusion that you can control the flow. You may ask, isn't craving what drives us? What about ambition? What about passion? What about love? The Buddha did not teach indifference. He taught clarity. There's a difference between love and attachment, between intention and obsession, between presence and grasping. True love does not demand. True ambition does not fear failure. True peace does not resist change. Craving always says, if I just get this, then I'll be happy. But even when we get it, what happens? A brief glow, then a new craving, or the fear of losing what we've gained. The Buddha saw this cycle and said, this is the fire that burns the world. And he did not mean metaphor. He literally described craving as a fire. The eyes are burning. The ears are burning. The mind is burning with the fires of craving, aversion, and delusion. It consumes, and it leaves us hollow. But, and here is the hope, if craving causes suffering, then ending craving ends suffering. This is the third noble truth, which we will explore next. But before that pause, reflect. Where does craving show up in your life? Not just in the obvious hungers, but in the subtle demands. The craving for certainty, the craving to be understood, the craving for things to always go your way, the craving to never be bored, never be sad, never be afraid. What would it be like to loosen your grip, to let things rise and fall without needing to catch them? That is not weakness. That is freedom. In the next section, we move from fire to stillness. We explore the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, not as a theory, but as a real, lived possibility. The end of suffering, freedom, is possible if the first noble truth names suffering and the second reveals its cause. Then the third noble truth offers the most radical proposition of all suffering can end. It's not a theory. It's not a metaphor. It's a direct truth, known by experience, not belief. The Buddha called it Nirodha, the cessation, the extinguishing, the cooling of the fire. This wasn't wishful thinking. It was what he lived, what he became. Let's pause on that. For millennia, human beings have wrestled with pain. We've tried to escape it, fix it, numb it, avoid it. Some said it was a test from the gods. Others believed it was eternal. Others said it must simply be endured. But the Buddha, he didn't just cope with suffering. He understood it, and in doing so, he dismantled it. He found that suffering is not inherent to existence. It is not life's punishment. It is optional in the deepest sense. Not the pain, but the bondage. Here's the heart of it. When craving ends, suffering ends. When the thirst no longer drives you, when the illusion of this must be mine dissolves, when the mind no longer builds stories around every flicker of change, then peace remains. Not a numb blank quiet, but a radiant, alert, unshakable stillness. This is Nibbana Nirvana in Sanskrit. Not a place, not heaven, but the unbinding of the mind from its compulsions. People ask, what is nirvana like? The Buddha often responded with silence, or he used metaphors. The fire that goes out, not because it was destroyed, but because it ran out of fuel. The lotus that rises from mud unstained. The ocean calm in its depths, even if waves roll above. It's not annihilation. It's not becoming nothing. It's becoming free. Free from grasping. free from identification, free from the need to be anyone at all. Imagine this: a thought arises and you see it but don't chase it. A feeling surges and you allow it but don't become it. A pleasure arrives and you enjoy it but don't cling. A loss comes and you grieve but don't collapse. That is not indifference. That is awakening. It's the deepest intimacy with life without the burden of ownership. But let's be honest, this freedom can sound far away, like a mountaintop too distant to reach. And yet, the Buddha never said it was instant. He said, like the sea which deepens gradually, so too does wisdom. Freedom is not a switch, it's a path. And the third noble truth is the beacon at its end. And here's what's revolutionary. You don't have to wait until death to taste it. Nibbana is not a prize for good behavior. It's a shift in perception available now in this breath. Every time you notice craving and choose not to feed it, you taste it. Every time you welcome impermanence instead of resisting, you glimpse it. Every time you drop the story and rest in what is, you touch it. Not forever, not perfectly. But like the first crack of dawn, it reminds you there is another way. And this truth changes everything. It means you're not trapped, not condemned, not broken. It means the cycles that have haunted humanity, grasping, clinging, becoming, are not chains of fate. They are patterns, and patterns can be broken. By wisdom, not willpower. By clarity, not control. Some call it the deathless, because what dies is the egoic struggle, not the being. What ends is suffering, not experience. The Buddha described it as the island amid the flood, the unshakable peace, the freedom beyond time. He did not demand belief. He offered a path, and that path begins by seeing this freedom is possible because it has been lived, and it can be lived again. In the next section, we move to the fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path. Not a theory, not a commandment, but a way to walk into this freedom step by step. Because it is not enough to know freedom is possible. We must live in a way that invites it. The way forward, the Eightfold Path. To name the problem is courage. To uncover its cause is wisdom. To believe in its end is faith. But to walk the road to freedom, that is the real work. This is the fourth noble truth. There is a path not based on blind belief, but on direct observation, on inner transformation, on actions that align the heart, the mind, and the world around you. The Buddha called it the Noble Eightfold Path. Not a ladder, not a checklist, but a spiral, each step supporting the others, each part deepening the whole. This is not a path to somewhere. It is a way of being in the here, in the now, in awareness. Let's begin with its foundation, right view. This isn't about opinions. It's not agreeing with Buddhism. Right view is the willingness to see things as they are. It starts with the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, but it deepens into direct seeing of impermanence, of cause and effect, of the way craving creates bondage. It's like removing fog glasses from the eyes. Suddenly things don't change, but your clarity does. From this clarity comes the next step, right intention. Right intention is the shaping of the heart, not ambition, not goals, but the deep resolve to live with non-harming, non-craving, and letting go. It's the soft commitment to walk gently through the world, not out of weakness, but out of profound strength and compassion. From the mind and heart, the path moves to the mouth, right speech. The Buddha said, "Speak only what is true, helpful, timely, and kind." Not out of moralism, but because words shape worlds. Every lie reinforces delusion. Every harsh word feeds separation. Every idle gossip strengthens ignorance. To purify speech is to refine perception. To guard language is to guard consciousness. Then comes right action, not as moral policing, but as alignment. To live without killing, stealing, or sexual misconduct is to unburden the heart. It's to stop creating ripples of harm that rebound into the mind as guilt, shame, or fear. Ethics are not rules. They are freedom from regret, and with right action comes right livelihood. The Buddha asked, "Does your work support awakening or obscure it? To earn without exploitation, to live without harming, to work in ways that bring clarity, not confusion." Whether farmer or artist, healer or teacher, the path can be walked in any role if it is held with integrity and awareness. From action, the path moves to effort, right effort. This is not forcing, not striving. It's the wise application of energy. The Buddha said, "Abandon what is unwholesome. Cultivate what is wholesome. Guard what is good, and develop it further." It's tending the garden of the mind, removing weeds, watering seeds of kindness, patience, insight. Not because you should, but because the fruit is peace. Then comes right mindfulness, the practice of paying attention, moment to moment without judgment, to feel the breath rise, to notice thoughts come and go, to watch sensations appear and dissolve, not to control them, but to know them, to dwell in presence so fully that even washing dishes becomes a meditation. Right mindfulness is the art of coming home to each moment as it is. And finally, the jewel at the crown, right concentration, the focused, steady attention that calms the storms of the mind. This is cultivated through jhana, states of meditative absorption, but not as escape. They are not for bliss. They are for insight. They still the noise so that truth becomes audible. Right concentration is the quiet flame that lights the darkness of delusion. Together, these 8 form a path, not of dogma, but of freedom. Not of belief, but of clarity. Each step supports the others. Each moment is a chance to begin again. The Eightfold Path is not about becoming perfect. It is about walking in a way that reduces harm, deepens insight, and leads to the unshakable peace that arises when we stop resisting reality. And this path is not ancient alone. It is timeless. Wherever a person chooses awareness over autopilot, compassion over ego, truth over delusion, the path is being walked. Not in temples, but in breath, in silence, in choice. In the next section, we'll explore how this path unfolds in daily life, not in the monastery, but in the marketplace, the home, the relationships we carry, and the choices we make, living the Dharma, the path in everyday life. It's easy to think the Buddha's teachings belong to monks, to mountain caves, to robes and incense and silence. But the truth is this: the Dharma is not confined to temples. It walks in kitchens, classrooms, hospitals, highways, and crowded subways. The Eightfold Path is not about where you are. It's about how you are. Not about escaping the world, but meeting it with new eyes. Imagine this: a mother rises early before the sun, not to meditate, but to prepare food for her children. She does it with presence, with love, without resentment, with care, without craving praise. That is right action. That is mindfulness. That is the path. Or a doctor stands in the hallway between patients, exhausted, but she takes one breath and softens. She chooses to greet the next person, not with rush, but with attention. That is the path. The Dharma is infinitely portable. You carry it in your breath, your tone, your gaze, You carry it in how you speak when no one is watching, in how you listen when someone needs to be heard, in how you pause before reacting and choose not to wound back. It's in how you walk away from gossip, how you forgive, how you let go even if the world around you still clings. The Buddha never said, "Go live in the forest." He said, "Wherever you dwell, let it be with wakefulness." You can practice mindfulness washing dishes. You can cultivate right speech in a business meeting. You can honor right livelihood, flipping burgers, or building empires, as long as you don't sell your integrity along the way. But it's not always easy. Modern life is noisy. It pulls your attention outward again and again. And every moment offers a distraction, a craving, a reaction. So the first tool you need is this remembering, sati, mindfulness, not as a perfect state, but as the gentle act of remembering again and again, "Oh yes, I'm here. Oh yes, this is the path. Oh yes, I can soften even now." Even traffic can be a bell. Even anger can be a teacher. Even sorrow can be an invitation to stop grasping at what changes. And joy is not to be feared. It is to be met with gratitude and grace, but not clung to. In every moment the question arises, am I feeding craving or releasing it, not to shame you, but to awaken you? This path is walked in one breath again and again. But what about failure? You will forget. You will react. You will cling. You will cause harm, yes, even with good intentions. And this too is part of the path. Because right effort means returning, forgiving yourself, trying again, not from guilt, but from love. The Dharma is not perfection. It is practice. Each time you return, each time you remember, the roots grow deeper. And as they grow, something changes. Your inner weather stabilizes. Your thoughts still arise, but they no longer command you. Your desires still flicker, but they no longer drag you. You find space between feeling and reaction. You find freedom in silence. You find peace, not in what happens, but in how you relate to it. This is how enlightenment begins. Not with fireworks, but with a quiet shift inside you. No longer need to win to be okay. You no longer need to be liked to feel worthy. You no longer chase peace because you've learned how to be still. This is how the Buddha walked. And this is how millions have walked since, in robes and jeans and silence and song. The Dharma doesn't care where you're from. It only asks, are you willing to wake up? And if the answer is yes, then your home, your office, your city becomes sacred ground. Not because of what's there, but because of how you walk through it. In the next section, we'll turn our gaze to the heart of practice itself, meditation. Not as a technique to escape discomfort, but as a doorway into radical presence where everything begins to unfold. The still point, meditation and the doorway within. There comes a moment, quiet, unassuming, when the outer world fades and the only thing left is breath. Not dramatic, not mystical, just breath, rising, falling, here, now. This is meditation, not a performance, not a means to an end, but a returning again and again to the truth already alive in this very moment. The Buddha didn't invent meditation. He refined it. He clarified its purpose. He peeled away the ritual and the mystique until what remained was pure awareness. To sit in silence and see, not to control, not to fix, but to witness the mind as it is. And what do we see? A mind that jumps, spins, clings. A parade of thought, sensation, memory, desire knocking at the door, resistance whispering in the ear. It can feel like chaos. But the Buddha never said to silence the mind. He said, know it, study it, Sit with it like you would with a frightened animal, patiently, gently, without force. Because the mind, when not feared, begins to soften. There are many forms of meditation in the Buddhist path, but at their core, they share a simple principle: be here for one breath, then another, and then another still. Start with mindfulness of breathing anapanasati, not because the breath is special, but because it's always here. Follow it like a tide, rising, falling. Each inhale a chance to arrive, each exhale a chance to let go. Distraction will come. That's not failure. That's the moment of practice. Because the magic isn't in never wandering, it's in returning. Other practices may include body scanning, bringing awareness to each region of the body, noticing tension, sensation, warmth, loving kindness metta, sending goodwill to yourself, then to others, then to all beings. Open awareness, sitting without focus, simply being with what arises and passes. Contemplation, reflecting gently on impermanence, death, or the Four Noble Truths, but all point in the same direction. Freedom from reactivity, freedom from illusion, freedom to be here without resistance. At first, meditation feels like doing nothing, but in time, you see you are witnessing the roots of your suffering. You are dissolving the habits of clinging. You are training the mind to stay with life as it is not as you wish it to be. And in that staying, there is a deep, deep peace. The Buddha described meditation as the path to knowing and seeing things as they truly are, not as dogma, but as lived experience. You begin to see thoughts arise and pass, emotions surge and fade. The self you clutch is just a bundle of habits and memories, and yet something remains. A stillness, a clarity, a presence that doesn't need to grasp. This stillness is not cold. It's warm, intimate, alive. It is the space in which love deepens, patience grows, and wisdom flowers. You begin to see that meditation isn't an escape from life. It is life stripped of noise. Of course, resistance comes. This is boring. I'm doing it wrong. Nothing's happening. But these thoughts, too, are part of the path. The Buddha said, "When the mind is still, happiness arises without cause. Because in stillness, you no longer chase. You no longer run. You simply are. And that is enough. So you sit, not for results, not for approval, but for truth. And the truth, quietly, gently, begins to shine." In the next section, we'll explore how this inner practice gives rise to compassion, not as sentiment, but as fierce, boundless care for all beings born from knowing your own suffering and seeing it in others. Compassion, when wisdom becomes love. As the mind quiets, as craving softens, as the self loosens its grip, what begins to bloom is something unexpected. Compassion, not as obligation, not as guilt, not as something to do, but as a natural outflow of clarity. Because when you stop obsessing over yourself, you start seeing others, really seeing them, not as roles, not as threats, not as tools, but as beings fragile, striving, confused, just like you. The Buddha never taught wisdom without compassion. He said, just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. That's not metaphor. It's a blueprint. Because when you know your own pain, when you've sat in your own fire, you begin to recognize it in others. And something in you can't help but reach out, not always in action, sometimes just in presence, but always with tenderness. Compassion in Buddhism is not pity. It's not looking down from comfort and saying poor them. It's the courage to walk beside someone in their suffering without needing to fix it, without needing it to end so you can feel better. It is bearing witness with an open heart, and it starts small. When someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of reacting, you breathe. When a loved one lashes out, and instead of retaliating, you see the fear underneath. When you feel judgment rising, and instead of indulging it, you soften. Compassion doesn't require grand gestures. It requires presence, but presence isn't easy. Because opening to others means opening to pain, yours and theirs. It means feeling the sorrow in the world without drowning in it. It means letting the tears come and still getting up to help. It means not turning away when it hurts to care. And that's why compassion is not weakness. It is strength refined by love. The Buddha called it karuna, a heart response so natural that it becomes instinct. Not reactive, but wise. Not sentimental, but steady. And compassion has a twin, loving kindness metta. If compassion is the response to suffering, metta is the proactive offering of goodwill. It's the quiet wish that all beings be happy, even those who challenge us, even those who don't see us, even those who have harmed us. Why? Because they too are trapped in craving. They too are walking the path blindly maybe, but walking nonetheless. The Buddha taught hatred never ends by hatred. It ends by love. This is an ancient truth. But how do we love in a world like this, with its wars, its cruelty, its division? We begin where we are. We love the person in front of us. We offer silence when silence heals. We offer words when words help. We forgive not to excuse, but to unchain ourselves. And when it's hard, we remember compassion isn't a feeling. It's a choice, one made again and again. Even in silence, you can radiate it. Even in conflict, you can remember the shared human struggle. Even in loneliness, you can send love outward and feel it return. This isn't magic. It's interbeing. The truth that no one exists in isolation. That your freedom is tied to mine. That what we do to each other, we do to ourselves. The more you meditate, the more you dissolve the illusion of separateness. And in that dissolving love arises, not possessive love, not romantic craving, but the pure joy of seeing another being as worthy of peace, even if they never thank you, even if they never know. Because compassion isn't about them. It's about who you become when your heart opens. This is the Bodhisattva ideal, a being who delays their own final liberation until all beings are free, not out of martyrdom, but out of understanding. They see that there is no self to save, only awareness flowing through countless forms. And so they bow and serve and love. In the next section, we'll deepen this understanding of interconnection as we explore the Buddhist teaching of non-self anatta, one of the most challenging, liberating, and beautiful insights on the path. Anatta, the freedom of no self. All your life, you've been told one thing: you are you, a fixed self, a consistent identity, a solid I. You've been taught to protect it, define it, express it, make it better, make it stronger, make it matter. But the Buddha saw through that story, and what he discovered was one of the most radical liberating truths in human history. There is no permanent self, no unchanging I behind your thoughts, no enduring essence that makes you you. Just process, just flow, just awareness arising and fading again and again. This is anatta, the truth of not self. To the modern ear, it sounds frightening. No self. What do you mean? Are you saying I don't exist? But the Buddha was not denying your experience. He was pointing out something subtle, something profound, that the self you think you are the thinker of thoughts, the chooser of actions, the owner of the body, is a construct, useful, functional, but ultimately empty. A story the mind tells to hold together the chaos. Let's look closer. Where is the self in your body? But the body changes. Every cell renews. Every feature shifts. Is the self in your youth, your age, your health, your name in your mind? But thoughts arise and pass. Moods swing. Beliefs evolve. Yesterday's self is not today's. So which one is you? Is the self the sum of memory? But memory is unreliable, skewed, selective, often invented. The Buddha taught that what we call a person is just 5 aggregates, 5 khandhas, form, the body, feeling, sensations, perception, how we interpret experience, mental formations, thoughts, intentions, habits, consciousness, awareness of experience. These are not self. They are not owned. They arise. They fade. They interact like a flame in the wind, never the same twice. And yet we say, this is me. But here's the miracle. When you see this not just as a concept, but as reality, you are free. Free from the compulsive need to defend the ego. Free from the endless project of self-improvement. Free from the fear of death because you see there is no one to die. Only process. Only change. Only unfolding awareness. This is not nihilism. This is not saying you are nothing. It's saying you are not a thing. You are not a frozen identity. You are a river, a dance, an event happening now and now and now. And in this realization, everything softens. Praise no longer inflates you. Blame no longer crushes you. Fear of loss weakens because there's nothing permanent to lose. Think of a wave on the ocean. It has a name, a shape, a direction. But is it separate from the sea? No. It's water. It's movement. It never stands still. So too with you. You are a wave of consciousness, arising, peaking, falling, beautiful, temporary, not to be clung to, not to be feared. But let's be clear. This insight is not easy. It can feel like a loss, like the ground is being taken from under you. But that's only because we're so used to clutching the idea of self. We think, if there's no self, how do I live? How do I love? How do I act? The Buddha's answer, without ego more freely. With less fear, with more compassion, with no one to defend, no one to elevate, no one to protect. Just presence, just response, just flow. And this insight, when integrated, brings profound peace. Because the self is where all our suffering clings. I was hurt. I need more. I am not enough. I must become something. When that I dissolves, so do its burdens. What's left is space. A clarity that embraces all but clings to none. This is why the Buddha didn't stop at life is suffering. He kept going until the roots of identity were seen for what they were. This is why liberation isn't becoming a better version of yourself. It's seeing that there never was a fixed self to begin with. And what a relief that is. You don't have to become anything. You just have to wake up. In the next section, we will explore how this truth of anatta leads to an even more expansive vision, interbeing the deep understanding that everything is connected, that no being exists alone, and that compassion flows from this unity. Interbeing, we are not separate. When you understand that the self is not fixed, not a static independent thing, a new possibility emerges. We are not alone. We never were. This is the insight of interbeing, a word not from ancient Pali, but from the modern Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, who saw clearly what the Buddha had always pointed toward. Nothing exists by itself. Everything exists because of everything else. Look around you. That tree. It's not just a tree. It contains the cloud that watered it, the sun that warmed it, the soil that nourished it, the lumberjack that might one day cut it, and the child who might one day climb it. Pull on any thread in the fabric of life, and the whole web quivers. Nothing stands alone. Not trees, not mountains, not people. Even your body is not yours. It is the food your parents ate, the air you share with everyone else, the DNA carried from untold generations, the bacteria in your gut that outnumber your human cells. Even your thoughts arise from languages you did not invent, concepts you inherited, fears shaped by culture, desires stirred by advertising memory conditioning. You are not a single being. You are a community, a constellation, a process in relationship with all other processes. And this changes everything. Because if we are not separate, then your suffering is not just your own. And your healing is not just personal, it is collective. When you sit in meditation, you don't just sit for yourself. You sit for your ancestors, for your children, for the stranger weeping in another room. When you soften your heart, the ripples touch those you will never meet. The Buddha hinted at this in many ways. He said, as a mother would protect her only child, so should we extend loving kindness to all beings above, below, and across, without boundary. Not because it's noble, because it's true. You are not other than the beggar. You are not other than the king. You are not other than the forest being razed, the animal in the slaughterhouse, the refugee, the enemy. This is not metaphor. It is reality. The same breath moves through all lungs. The same fears haunt all hearts. The same longing pulses beneath all skin. When the idea of I loosens, what floods in is we. And we is not sentimental. It's fierce. It's honest. It holds you accountable. Because how you treat others is how you treat yourself. And how you treat yourself sets the tone for how you will treat the world. This is why non-harming ahimsa is central to Buddhist ethics. Because in harming another, you sever the thread of belonging. You reinforce the illusion of separation. You poison the well you too must drink from. But in acting with compassion, you restore the web. You become a healer in a world that has forgotten its wholeness. This is not about becoming a saint. It's about seeing clearly. When you hold anger, it infects your own heart first. When you forgive, it frees you more than anyone else. When you care even quietly, the world becomes more livable. The world doesn't need more enlightenment in the abstract. It needs humans who remember they are not separate. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, we inter-are. He taught that even a single piece of paper contains the entire universe. The loggers who cut the tree, the rain that fed it, the sun that dried it, the hands that pulped it, the eyes that now read it. If the cloud did not exist, the tree could not exist. If the tree did not exist, the paper could not exist. So when you touch the paper, you touch the cloud. So too, when you touch another person with kindness, with understanding, you touch the whole of life. Interbeing is not a concept. It's a way of walking, of eating, of working, of loving. It asks only one thing. Live in a way that acknowledges your connection to all things. And from this knowing, something beautiful arises, responsibility without burden. You don't have to fix the whole world, but you must not pretend it is not your concern. Every choice you make, what you buy, how you speak, what you consume, how you vote, how you listen, echoes far beyond your tiny self. And this is empowering, because it means every act of mindfulness, every act of love is a seed. And who knows what forest may grow from the seeds you plant today. In the next section, we will explore how the insights of impermanence, non-self, and interbeing all converge into a single liberating truth. Emptiness, a concept often misunderstood, yet central to awakening. Emptiness, the spaciousness of shunyata. There is a teaching in Buddhism so subtle, so easily misunderstood, and yet so central to awakening that the Buddha reserved it for those ready to see beyond form and concept. This is the truth of emptiness shunyata. At first, it sounds bleak. To the ordinary ear, emptiness evokes void meaninglessness loss. But to the awakened heart, emptiness is not absence. It is openness. It is freedom. It is the space in which everything lives and moves and changes without being stuck. So what is shunyata? To understand it, you must first remember two things. Everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts. Nothing possesses a separate independent self. Everything arises through causes and conditions. Put these together, and what do you see? You begin to realize that nothing has a fixed essence. Not a table, not a mountain, not a person, not even the idea of Buddhism itself. Everything is empty of inherent identity, and because of that, everything is possible. Think of a cup. Is it a cup in and of itself? No. It's clay. It's shaped by hands. It's held together by space. It only becomes a cup when used to hold something. Without water, is it still a cup? Without someone to use it, you see, it is empty of fixed self. And because it is empty, it can serve tea, or hold flowers, or break, and become part of the soil again. Its emptiness is its freedom. This is not abstract philosophy. It is the very nature of your experience. You, too, are not a fixed being. You are not your past. You are not your job. You are not your failures. You are not your desires. You are a process ever shifting. You are empty of self. And that means you are free to change. You are free to awaken. You are not bound by the stories you've been told. Shunyata is also the key to understanding suffering. When we suffer, it's because we cling to what we believe is solid. A relationship we thought would last forever. A role we thought defined us. A body we thought would stay strong. A belief we thought could never be challenged. But nothing is solid. And when we open to emptiness, we open to the truth of change. And in that acceptance, suffering begins to fall away. This is why the great Zen teacher Nagarjuna said, "Emptiness wrongly grasped is like picking up a poisonous snake by the wrong end." Because emptiness is not nihilism. It is not saying nothing matters. It is saying everything matters, but nothing is fixed. Everything is real, but nothing is independent. And from this insight comes great compassion. Because if all things are empty, then all things are interconnected, ungraspable, and yet precious in their impermanence. In meditation, you can touch this. You sit. Thoughts arise. You notice they come from nowhere. They pass. You cannot hold on to them. Even the you observing is just another thought. You become like space open, holding everything attached to nothing. You are not nothing. You are not one thing. You are emptiness dancing as form. And this is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This line from the Heart Sutra, one of the most profound scriptures in Mahayana Buddhism, holds a paradox that cannot be solved, only lived. Everything you see, feel, touch, and know appears solid, but is empty. And everything that is empty can take form. That's how a tree becomes paper. That's how pain becomes compassion. That's how loss becomes awakening. Shunyata is not cold. It is luminous. Like the sky, it holds all clouds, but clings to none. Like the ocean, it reflects all moons, but swallows none. It is the silence in which music is born, the canvas on which life paints its colors, the breath that allows words to rise. To awaken to shunyata is to rest in the groundless ground of being, where nothing is fixed and everything is possible. And so the Buddha did not leave us with dogma. He left us with a mirror to look at the world and see clearly. Everything arises. Everything passes. Nothing stands alone. Nothing is truly lost. In that seeing, there is no fear, no need to clutch, no need to control, only space and peace, and the tender willingness to let life be as it is. In the next section, we will explore death and rebirth, not as literal reincarnation, but as a metaphor for transformation, renewal, and the ever-turning wheel of becoming. Death, rebirth, and the wheel of becoming the Buddha taught that life is a cycle, a wheel turning again and again. Birth, death, rebirth, not just across lifetimes, but in every breath, every moment. This is samsara, the wheel of becoming. But what does it mean really? Are we reborn as other people, animals, celestial beings? Perhaps. But let's look deeper. Let's explore rebirth, not as a mystical doctrine, but as a profound metaphor for how we live, suffer, and awaken moment to moment. Each time you react without awareness, you are reborn into anger, fear, craving. Each time you pause, breathe, and respond with wisdom, you are reborn into presence, compassion, freedom. The cycle of suffering isn't just cosmic, it's psychological. It's now. Let's begin with death. Death to the Buddha was not the end. It was change, a transformation of form, not a disappearance of essence. He saw death not as something to fear, but as the clearest teacher of impermanence. He said, all compounded things must dissolve. And so, to live in fear of death is to fight what is natural. To live with death in your heart is to live with clarity, humility, urgency. But what is it that dies? Not a fixed self, not a soul, just this body, these patterns, these formations that have come together for a while and will come apart. Just as a flame passes from one candle to another, so too does life continue, not as an I, but as karma, action, consequence unfolding. So we begin to see, rebirth is not necessarily about becoming another person in another life. Rebirth is happening right now. In the moment you drop a grudge. In the moment you choose love over fear. In the moment you stop the inner war. You die to who you were. You are born to who you are becoming. The Buddha taught the 12 links of dependent origination, padakasamuppada, to show how this wheel turns. In short, he said, ignorance leads to mental formations, which condition consciousness, which conditions name and form mind and body, leading to 6 senses, which contact sense objects, giving rise to feeling, which stirs, craving, which fuels, clinging, leading to becoming, and then birth followed by old age and death, and the cycle continues. Overwhelming, yes, but also liberating. Because if the cycle arises from ignorance, then breaking the chain begins with wisdom. That's the power of awakening. It doesn't stop death, but it stops unnecessary rebirth, the compulsive cycle of suffering caused by craving and delusion. This is nirvana, the extinguishing of that which burns, not a place, not a void, but a peace so deep, so silent that rebirth no longer pulls you in. But what does this mean for our lives? It means you can meet every ending, not with panic, but with reverence. The end of a relationship, a chance to rebirth into wholeness, the loss of a job, a moment to let go of identity and begin again, the death of a loved one, an opening to grieve love deeper and soften. Rebirth doesn't need to be supernatural to be sacred. It's in the breath after the breakdown. It's in the step after the fall. It's in the forgiveness that changes a future. And so the wheel keeps turning until one day it doesn't. Not because you've disappeared, but because the conditions for rebirth, craving, clinging, ignorance have been understood, met with compassion, and let go. This is the great release, the ending of becoming, the resting in what is. So ask yourself, where today am I dying? Where today am I being reborn? What part of me is caught in the wheel? What part of me is stepping off? Each moment is a choice to cycle again through suffering, or to pause, see clearly, and step free. In the next section, we'll explore karma, not as punishment or reward, but as the deep law of cause and effect that shapes our lives and offers us both responsibility and freedom. Karma, the seeds we sow. You've likely heard the word karma. In pop culture, it's tossed around casually. Good karma, bad karma, as if it's some kind of cosmic scoreboard. A divine reward system that dishes out justice. Do good, get good. Do bad, get punished. But the Buddha's teaching on karma is far more subtle, more empowering, and more immediate. Karma means action. But not just physical action, also speech, intention, and thought. It is the law of cause and effect, the understanding that every action plants a seed. And those seeds ripen, not because a God watches over you, not because the universe wants revenge, but because that's the nature of reality. What you do shapes who you become. Think of your mind like a field. Every thought, every word, every deed, a seed. Some seeds are born from greed, hatred, and delusion. Others from generosity, love, and clarity. The field doesn't judge. It simply yields what is sown. Anger grows thorns. Kindness grows peace. And once you see this, you realize you are the gardener. This isn't about blame. It's about responsibility. Karma doesn't mean you deserve your suffering. It means your life is shaped by patterns, some inherited, some chosen. And the more aware you become, the more power you have to choose differently. Because karma isn't just about the past. It's about the present. Right now, in this very breath, you are planting the seeds of your future. The Buddha taught 4 types of karma that ripens immediately, like touching a hot stove and feeling pain. Karma that ripens later, like eating unhealthy food for years, then facing illness. Karma that ripens in future lives, whether literal or metaphorical. It reminds us our actions echo beyond what we see. Karma that's nullified when deep wisdom or insight dissolves its momentum. But the most important teaching is this: karma is not fate. You are not doomed by your past. The moment you act with awareness, you change the pattern. That's why the Eightfold Path begins with right view and right intention. Because the moment you see clearly, your choices begin to align with truth. And this changes everything. When you speak gently, instead of harshly. When you give instead of take. When you pause instead of react. You shift your karmic momentum, one moment at a time, one seed at a time. Karma also applies collectively. Our societies carry collective karma, histories of violence, inequality, and exploitation, but also of resilience, generosity, and transformation. Understanding this helps us hold complexity. We are not just individuals. We are communities of action and consequence. And the healing of one can ripple outward into the whole. But karma isn't about control. You can plant good seeds and still face storms. You can act with compassion and still be hurt. Because not all karma is yours. And the world is vast. The point is not to manipulate outcome, but to purify intention. To live in such a way that your heart remains clear, your mind steady, your hands kind, even when no one sees, even when it's hard. That's real power. And when you live this way, something beautiful happens. You become trustworthy to others, yes, but also to yourself. You no longer fear what the future holds because you know what you're planting today. You walk with integrity. You sleep with peace. You become the kind of person whose presence heals the space around them, not because you chase good karma, but because you are aligned. So karma is not a threat. It is a teacher, a compass, a mirror. Every moment asking, are you acting from love or fear? Are you reacting from pain? Or responding with wisdom? Are you building more suffering or easing it? And with each small choice, you decide, who do I become now? In the next section, we'll explore how the Buddhist path brings these insights together. Impermanence, non-self, interbeing, emptiness, karma, into a life of wise action, guided not by rules, but by presence and compassion. The path, walking the way of wisdom and compassion. Once we've seen the nature of things, that all is impermanent, that the self is not fixed, that we are deeply interconnected, and that every action shapes the world, the question naturally arises, so how should we live? What does it mean to walk through the world, not with blind habit, but with awakened eyes? What does it mean to live the Dharma, not just understand it? The Buddha answered this, not with commandments, but with a guide, a path, 8 steps, simple, profound, complete. This is the Noble Eightfold Path, and it is not linear. It is a circle, each part reinforcing the others like spokes on a wheel. Let's begin. Right view. To see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. This means understanding impermanence, understanding karma, understanding suffering not as a flaw in life, but as a teacher. Right. View isn't about belief. It's about clarity. Right intention. Once we see clearly, we must ask, what is the motivation behind our actions? Is it rooted in greed, hatred, delusion, or in renunciation, goodwill, compassion? Right? Intention shapes the heart. It's the soil from which all actions grow. Right speech words are powerful. They can harm. They can heal. The Buddha said to speak only what is true, kind, beneficial, timely. This is not about silence. It's about sacred speech, using language to uplift, not to wound. Right action. Here ethics become embodied, to live with non-violence, to honor life, to act with honesty, to respect others' boundaries, relationships, and belongings. It's not morality for its own sake. It's living in alignment with the truth of interbeing, right livelihood. How do you earn your living? Does it cause harm? Exploit others? Promote addiction, violence, or deceit? Or does it serve, uplift, create peace? Right livelihood is the radical idea that your work is part of your spiritual path, not separate, not neutral, but sacred. Right effort. This is not about grinding or striving. It's about balance. Effort that is steady, joyful, and wise. Effort that abandons what harms, cultivates what heals, and protects what is good. Like tending a garden. Not forcing growth, but removing weeds, watering roots, trusting the process. Right mindfulness. The art of paying attention. To walk, to breathe, to eat, to feel with awareness, to know moment by moment what you are doing, feeling, thinking. Mindfulness is the thread that binds the path together. Without it, even good intentions go astray. With it, every act becomes meditation, right concentration. Not forceful focus, but gentle, collected presence. In meditation, it's the quiet stillness that allows insight to rise. In life, it's being fully here, not scattered, not distracted. Right concentration is the peace that comes from being undivided. And from that peace, wisdom flows naturally. The Eightfold Path is not a set of rules. It's a way of being. Not rigid, not dogmatic, but responsive, fluid, awake. It doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for integrity. To let your understanding shape your speech shape your actions reinforce your view. Over time, you don't just believe the Dharma. You become it, and this is the secret. The path is not a ladder you climb. It is the walking itself. Each step is the destination. Each moment lived with mindfulness, compassion, and insight is liberation in motion. You don't walk the path to get to peace. You walk the path as peace. And in a world that rushes, that burns with desire and distraction, to walk slowly, mindfully, kindly is a radical act, a revolution of the heart. In the next section, we will explore how this inner transformation reshapes how we relate to the outer world, how a mind aligned with truth begins to engage with society, injustice, suffering, and community with clarity and love. Engaged wisdom, bringing the path into the world. So far, we've walked the path inward. We've explored suffering, impermanence, the illusion of self, the emptiness of things, and how karma and conscious action plant the seeds of freedom. But what happens when this quiet wisdom meets a noisy world? A world filled with conflict, injustice, inequality, and grief. Does the spiritual path ask you to turn away, to retreat into silence, letting the world burn? The Buddha's answer was clear. No. True understanding doesn't withdraw from the world, it embraces it. This is the heart of engaged Buddhism. To be awake is not just to be peaceful. It is to be responsive, and not from reactivity or ego, but from deep seeing. When you understand interbeing, you realize your peace is not separate from the world's peace. Your suffering is not separate from the world's wounds. So your practice becomes your presence in the midst of it all. Let's begin where the Buddha began, with compassion. Compassion is not pity. It is not condescension. It is the natural response of a heart that sees clearly. When you see suffering, really see it, you don't turn away. You lean in, not to fix everything, not to save the world, but to say, I see you. You are not alone. And from that comes skillful action, because compassion without wisdom burns out. Wisdom without compassion becomes cold. Together, they form right action in the world. You don't act from guilt. You act from clarity. You don't speak from anger. You speak from truth. You don't try to save everyone. You stay rooted in the small, consistent acts that ripple outward. Thich Nhat Hanh, a master of engaged Buddhism, once said, "It is not enough to meditate in a meditation hall. We have to look deeply into the situation of the world." He taught monks to protest with mindfulness. He taught governments to breathe. He offered a path not of escapism, but of loving, wise engagement. What does this look like in your life? It might be listening deeply when someone is in pain without trying to fix them. Choosing work that uplifts, not exploits. Speaking up when you witness injustice. Consuming with awareness your food, your media, your attention. Volunteering, donating, educating, caring for the earth as a sacred expression of interdependence, and always doing so without ego, without superiority. Just presence, just love, just wisdom in action. Buddhism doesn't ask you to become a hero. It asks you to become human, fully vulnerably, courageously. And when the world overwhelms the teaching, reminds you, return to the breath, return to stillness, return to right view, because your clarity is needed. Your calm is revolutionary. Some might say, but the world is too broken. What can one person do? And Buddhism replies, everything. Because one mindful step, one kind word, one act of generosity can change a life. And changing one life changes the web of interbeing. Never doubt the ripple effect of your integrity. This is how the Bodhisattva lives. The Bodhisattva is not a saint in the clouds. She is the one who vows to keep returning again and again until all beings are free. She sees the suffering of the world and walks toward it, not away. With eyes open, with heart soft, with hands ready. Engaged Buddhism does not separate the sacred from the ordinary. It teaches doing the dishes with mindfulness is no different than meditation. Planting a tree is no less spiritual than chanting a mantra. Feeding someone hungry is feeding the Buddha, because everything is the path, and the path is made by walking. So don't wait until you're perfect. Don't wait until you know all the sutras. Start now. Start wherever you are. Start with what you have. Let the Dharma flow through your life, not as a theory, but as a living force. In the next section, we'll explore joy, yes, joy. Not as a fleeting pleasure, but as a deep, abiding gladness that arises not despite suffering, but from the very heart of it. The joy that survives sorrow. It might seem strange, even offensive, to speak of joy in a world overflowing with suffering. But Buddhism does not deny sorrow. It embraces it completely tenderly, without resistance. And then in the stillness of that embrace, something unexpected rises joy. Not the sugar rush joy of distraction, not the giddy joy of fleeting victories, but a quiet, luminous joy, the kind that holds both tears and laughter, the kind that does not depend on circumstances. The Buddha spoke of this joy often. He taught that true happiness is not found in possessions, titles, pleasures, or praise, because all of these come and go. He called this kind of joy piti, a rapture that arises from inner peace from a mind no longer enslaved by craving. Where does this joy come from? From seeing clearly, from letting go. When you release your grip on needing things to be a certain way, joy arises. When you stop chasing what cannot last, joy arises. When you sit in the middle of your life, exactly as it is, joy arises. It's not about denying pain. It's about not needing pain to disappear in order to be whole. That's radical joy. Think of a lotus. It blooms only in the mud. Without the dark, thick soil beneath it, it cannot rise. Your joy, too, is born not from avoiding sorrow, but from transforming it, from saying yes. This, too, this joy is a companion to compassion, because when your heart breaks open, it doesn't just break for others. It also opens to life, to the beauty of a leaf trembling in the wind, to the kindness of a stranger's smile, to the quiet miracle of breath moving in and out. And in that moment, you realize you're alive. And that is enough. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha describes 4 kinds of joy known as the Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes, metta loving kindness. The joy of wishing well for all beings, karuna compassion. The joy of caring for those who suffer, mudita sympathetic joy. The joy of celebrating others' happiness, upekkha equanimity. The joy of calm, balanced presence in all things. These are not emotions you wait for. They are practices. They are habits of heart. And the more you train them, the more natural they become. Sympathetic joy, mudita, is especially rare in the modern world. We are often conditioned to compete, to compare, to envy. But the Buddha invites us to flip the script, rejoice when others thrive. Let their joy be your joy. This cuts through jealousy. This opens the heart. And suddenly, the happiness of the world is no longer separate from your own. Joy is also an anchor. In dark times, it's not escapism. It's a rebellion against despair. It says, yes, the world hurts. Yes, I am grieving. And still, I can be grateful. Still, I can find beauty. Still, I can laugh, breathe, live. This is not naive. This is the strength of a warrior. And sometimes joy comes softly, not as celebration, but as relief. The moment you stop running, the moment you forgive, the moment you touch stillness. In that stillness, joy blooms. Not because anything has changed, but because you have. You've stopped clinging. You've started being. The Buddha smiled often. So did his great disciples. Why? Because they were free. Not from life, but from illusion. And freedom feels like joy. So let joy become your practice. Look for it. Cultivate it. Share it. In simple things. In hard times. In quiet moments no one else sees. Let it be the thread that carries you through. In the next section, we will explore the power of silence, not just as the absence of noise, but as the womb of wisdom, the space where truth is born, and the final resting place of all things. The power of silence, where truth is heard most clearly. In a world constantly shouting, silence can feel like a lost art. But to the Buddha, silence was not emptiness. It was presence. It was wisdom. It was the space in which the deepest truths could be heard, not with the ears, but with the whole being. When Siddhartha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he was not chanting. He was not arguing. He was not asking questions. He was silent. And in that silence, the universe opened, not with thunder, but with stillness. Buddhist teachings are full of words, sutras, discourses, parables. But the deepest teaching is beyond words. It is what remains when the mind stops grasping, when the heart stops narrating, when the self becomes quiet. In that space, you don't learn more. You unlearn. You shed ideas. You let go of needing answers. You melt into the mystery, and their truth speaks softly, clearly. This is not silence as repression. It is not the silence of fear or passivity. It is the silence of the open sky, the calm lake, the mountain, unmoved by storms. It is the silence that allows everything to arise and holds it with equanimity. Think of the greatest insights you've had. Did they come while scrolling, talking, debating, or did they arrive in the quiet moments, sitting alone in nature, watching the sun rise? After a deep breath, a deep cry, a deep surrender. That's the power of silence. It's not absence, it's the presence of presence. In Zen, there's a saying, when the mouth is closed, the mind can open. And another, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Silence isn't about escaping life. It's about entering life fully without commentary. Doing the dishes, feeling the water. Walking, hearing your footsteps. Sitting, breathing, just breathing. No story, no drama. Just this. Even in speech, silence has its place. The Buddha was famous for noble silence, choosing not to answer when words would only add confusion. When someone asked, "What happens after death?" he sometimes said nothing. Why? Because no answer would satisfy the craving mind. Only direct experience born in silence can free us. In meditation, we return to this over and over. The breath comes and goes. Thoughts rise and pass. No need to chase them. No need to fight them. Just rest. Rest in awareness. Rest in the ground of being. And in that resting, a miracle unfolds. You stop needing to be anything. You just are. This is why silence is so healing. Because it's not trying to fix you. It's not demanding. It doesn't push or pull. It just is. And when you meet it, when you stop running, you rediscover your own wholeness. You remember that you are not your noise, not your past, not your future. You are this awareness, this stillness, this breath. The world may not value silence, but the path does. Because in silence, you hear the suffering of others more clearly. You hear your own heart more honestly. You hear the Dharma not as a lesson, but as a living truth pulsing in every cell. And so take time for silence. Let it be sacred. A pause before speaking, a breath before reacting, a walk without your phone, a morning with nothing but tea and stillness. In those spaces, you meet the real you, not the role, not the mask, not the seeker, just this being, this breath, this now. In the next section, we will explore forgiveness, not as forgetting and not as permission, but as the profound act of releasing the chains we place around our own hearts. The liberation of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not often the first word people associate with Buddhism. There are no 10 commandments here that say thou shalt forgive. No threats of divine punishment if you hold a grudge. But look closer and you'll see that forgiveness is woven into the heart of the path. Because the path is about freedom. And there is no freedom without release. To forgive does not mean to forget. It does not mean to excuse. Does not mean to invite harm again. Forgiveness means this: I will not carry this anymore. Not because the other person deserves it, but because I deserve peace. Because this pain, this anger, this bitterness, it is heavy. And I am ready to lay it down. In Buddhist teachings, anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other to die. Resentment is a fire that burns only the vessel that contains it. And clinging to blame is like clutching a burning coal, intending to throw it, but getting burned all the same. The Buddha never demanded forgiveness. He simply showed what unforgiveness does to the heart. And then he asked, is this the path you want to walk? Forgiveness begins with understanding. No one hurts from wholeness. Every act of cruelty comes from suffering. This does not excuse it, but it explains it. And that understanding softens the mind. It opens the door. And then comes the real work. To sit with your pain, to hold it tenderly, and to say, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt, but I choose not to let it define me. You are not your story. You are not your wound. You are what you do with it. And forgiveness is the alchemy that transforms pain into wisdom. It's also a process, sometimes slow, sometimes layered. You may forgive, and then the anger returns. That's okay. Just return to the breath. Return to the intention. Return to the vow, I am letting go, not for them, but for me. The Buddha taught about metta-loving kindness, a practice of sending goodwill to all beings, including friends, strangers, enemies, yourself, and that last one is often the hardest. Because many of us carry shame. We punish ourselves for past mistakes. We call ourselves unworthy. But the path asks, can you forgive yourself? Not because you were perfect, but because you are human, because you are trying, because you have suffered, because carrying guilt serves no one. Forgiveness is not soft. It is strong. It is a warrior's act. To stand before your pain and say, you do not own me. To open your hand and let go of the stone you've carried so long, you forgot it wasn't part of your body. And sometimes forgiveness is silent. No grand gestures, no letters, no closure, just a quiet turning inward, a whispered surrender. A breath, and then another, and something loosens inside. You didn't think it was possible, but it is. You are freer now. This is the Dharma in motion, not a philosophy in books, but a transformation in the heart. You don't forgive to be holy. You forgive to be whole. You forgive not to change the past, but to reclaim your future. And if the wound still aches, if you're not ready yet, that's okay too. Sit with your pain. Breathe with it. Be gentle. Even the willingness to forgive is already a doorway. In the next section, we will explore death and the art of dying, not as tragedy, but as a teacher, a mirror of impermanence, and the ultimate call to awaken before it's too late. Death, the final teacher. Death. Even the word causes many to turn away, to change the subject, to reach for distraction, to seek comfort in denial. But Buddhism turns toward death, gently, calmly, courageously, because death is not the end. It is the mirror in which life becomes clear. The Buddha himself said, of all the footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Of all contemplations, the contemplation of death is supreme. Why? Because nothing reveals the truth of impermanence more fully. Nothing strips away illusion more quickly. Nothing teaches urgency more deeply. To live with awareness of death is to live fully awake. We are all dying. Not someday, but now. With every breath, we move closer to the end of this chapter. This is not meant to sadden you. It is meant to liberate you. Because when you know this moment could be your last, you begin to truly cherish it. Not with fear, but with reverence. In the Buddhist tradition, monks meditate in graveyards. They chant to bones. They sit with corpses. Why? Because death is not morbid. It is sacred. It is the great equalizer. It humbles the proud. It softens the angry. It awakens the distracted. And it asks the most powerful question of all. What will you do with this precious breath? To reflect on death is not to become depressed. It is to become clear. Clear about what matters. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you've been avoiding. And with that clarity comes grace. You stop postponing joy. You stop clinging to things that don't last. You stop pretending you are immune to change. You begin to live in alignment. Because the truth is, you do not know when your final breath will come, but you know that it will. And that knowing can either paralyze you or wake you up. The Buddha died peacefully surrounded by his disciples. His final words, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently for your liberation." He did not cling. He did not fear. He let go fully, completely, joyfully. This is what the path prepares us for, to meet death as a friend, not a foe. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is the Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It teaches that death is a transition, a space between lives filled with opportunity and challenge. But more than that, it teaches how you die is how you live. If you live clinging, you will die clinging. If you live awake, you will die awake. Death becomes a continuation, not a cutoff. So how do we prepare? Not with dread, but with mindfulness. By making peace with our regrets, by forgiving and asking forgiveness, by loving now, not later, by practicing letting go every day. Every moment, you surrender your expectations, your judgments, your attachments. You rehearse death. And in doing so, you discover that death is not darkness. It is the opening into mystery. Imagine living in such a way that you are always ready to die. Not because you've given up, but because you've shown up fully, lovingly, completely. That is freedom. That is awakening. And it is possible, not for saints, but for you. One day, this body will return to earth. This breath will stop. But the love you lived, the wisdom you embodied, the compassion you offered, that continues in memory, in ripple, in spirit, and perhaps in ways we cannot yet understand. So don't be afraid of death. Let it walk beside you. Let it remind you to be here now. Let it teach you what it means to truly live. In the next section, we will explore rebirth and the cycle of samsara, how the wheel of existence turns, and how the Buddha showed a way to step beyond its spinning grasp. The cycle of samsara, escaping the spinning wheel. Imagine a wheel turning endlessly. Birth, death, rebirth, joy, pain, over and over again. This is samsara, the cycle of existence in Buddhist cosmology. It is not just literal reincarnation. It is the psychological, emotional, and spiritual cycle of craving, attachment, and ignorance that keeps us trapped in suffering. Samsara isn't just out there. It's here every time you chase a desire, cling to an identity, run from discomfort. It is the restless mind, the hungry heart, the unexamined life. And unless we wake up, we are bound to it. In traditional teachings, samsara unfolds across 6 realms of rebirth, Deva realm gods, pleasant, blissful, but blinded by pride and comfort, Asura realm titans, powerful, competitive, driven by jealousy, human realm, precious and rare, filled with both suffering and spiritual opportunity, animal realm, driven by instinct, fear and ignorance, Preta realm, hungry ghosts, consumed by insatiable craving and dissatisfaction, Naraka realm, hells, states of extreme suffering born from hatred or harm. These are not necessarily places. They are states of mind. And we pass through them daily, When you act with wisdom, you dwell in the human realm. When you're lost in addiction, you're among the hungry ghosts. When you burn with rage, you visit the hells. When you gloat, you bask in the illusion of the gods. The realms are not distant. They are now. What powers this wheel? Ignorance, craving, aversion. These are the three poisons symbolized in Tibetan art by a pig, ignorance, a rooster, craving, a snake, hatred. They chase each other endlessly at the center of the wheel. Around them spin the causes and effects of karma actions, driven by delusion, leading to more birth, more death, more becoming. It is a machine that feeds on itself. But here's the heart of the teaching. You don't have to stay on the wheel. You can step off. This is the radical promise of Buddhism. Not just to improve your circumstances, but to awaken from the entire dream. To no longer be pushed by desire or pulled by fear. To break the chain of reaction and be free. This is nirvana, not a place, but the cessation of the burning. The extinguishing of craving. The cooling of the fire. How? Through understanding. Through practice. Through letting go. The Eightfold Path is the map. Right view lets you see the wheel. Right intention turns your heart from clinging. Right action stops you from spinning it faster. Right mindfulness shows you where you are. Right concentration centers you in the present. Each step loosens a spoke, until eventually the wheel stops. This doesn't mean you vanish. It means you are no longer driven. You can live, breathe, walk through this world, but with peace. Not pulled by past karma, not pushed by future fear. You become like the lotus rising above the muddy water, but untouched by it. This is not escape. It's engagement without entanglement. To love without grasping. To act without ego. To live without clinging to life. This is what the Buddha did, and what he invites you to do. Not later. Not in another life. Now. Even modern psychology echoes this. Patterns of thought trauma reactivity, they loop, repeat, recycle. Until seen, until healed, until the mind wakes up and says, I choose a different way. That is the beginning of liberation. That is the end of samsara. In the next section, we will explore awakening itself, not as a mystical event far away, but as something possible here now within you. Awakening, the end of seeking. What if you stopped seeking? Not because you gave up, but because you finally saw there is nowhere else to go. This is awakening, not a bolt of lightning, not a cosmic explosion, but a quiet, steady seeing, a shift from illusion to truth, from grasping to letting go, from doing to being. The Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree was not the gaining of something new. It was the ending of delusion. He saw reality as it is not as he wanted it to be. He saw impermanent suffering and no self, and he no longer resisted. No more clinging, no more running, just presence, just peace. Awakening isn't a destination. It's not reserved for monks in robes or yogis on mountaintops. It's already within you, right now, behind the thoughts, beneath the stories. It's the spacious awareness that has always been watching. You don't need to become something. You need to remember. Imagine waking from a dream. In the dream, everything felt real. You were afraid, hopeful, desperate, joyful. Then you opened your eyes and the fear vanished. Not because the dream changed, but because you did. This is awakening. Not changing the world, but seeing through it. not escaping reality, but embracing it without filters. In Zen, a student asks the master, "What is enlightenment?" The master replies, "When I eat, I eat. When I sleep, I sleep." It's not about doing exotic things. It's about doing ordinary things without distraction, without illusion, without self-centeredness. Just this bite of food, just this breath, just this moment. And yet awakening is not a static state. It is a process, a path, a deepening. You may glimpse it in meditation and then lose it in traffic. You may feel spacious and then tighten again when someone criticizes you. That's okay. Each moment is a chance to remember, to come back, to rest in the truth of what you already are. Awakening is not perfection. It is not becoming emotionless. It is not floating above pain. It is the ability to feel deeply, but not be swept away. To act compassionately, but without ego. To be alive and free. The awakened one still feels grief, still sees injustice, still cries, but they no longer take it personally. They no longer get stuck in the story. They move through the world like wind through trees, touching everything, but clinging to nothing. So how do you wake up? You stop resisting. You stop running. You sit. You breathe. You look deeply. And you let go. Let go of control. Let go of the need to understand. Let go of the idea of me. And what's left? Silence. Awareness. Love. That is awakening. And then you walk. Not to get somewhere, but because the walking itself is sacred. You speak not to impress, but to serve truth. You breathe not to survive, but to honor life. Every act becomes holy. Every moment becomes a gate. This is the miracle. This is the Dharma. In the next and final section, we'll bring it all together. Not just to reflect on what we've heard, but to gently remember what was never lost. The final breath. Remembering what was never lost. And now we arrive, not at an ending, but at a soft returning. To the breath, to the body, to this moment, to what has always been here, quietly waiting beneath the noise. We have walked with the Buddha from palace to forest, from craving to compassion, from birth to death, from seeking to awakening. But this was never just his story. It was yours. Because the Dharma is not a tale to admire, it is a mirror to remember who you are. You are not the thoughts that rise and fall. You are not the mistakes you've made. You are not the name others call you. You are not the roles you play. You are the stillness behind it all. The witness, the light, the space that holds it tenderly. The Buddha didn't give us a religion to obey. He gave us a path to walk. He said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Not because you're alone, but because the flame you seek has always been within. The Four Noble Truths showed us suffering and also the end of suffering. The Eightfold Path guided our steps into wisdom, into ethics, into mindfulness. We've seen the poisons and the medicine. We've sat with silence. We've forgiven. We've loved. We've let go. And still the practice continues. Because enlightenment is not a finish line. It is the way we live breath by breath, choice by choice. So, what now? Now you walk. You return to your life, but with new eyes. You listen more deeply. You speak more truthfully. You hold more gently. You need less. You give more. You become the Dharma not in theory, but in the quiet, beautiful shape of your days. And when you fall asleep tonight, let it be a meditation. Let it be a letting go of thought, of fear, of everything that is not now. Let your pillow become a cushion of peace. Let your room become a temple. Let your final thought be one of gratitude. Gratitude for being, for breathing, for remembering. Because you don't have to chase awakening. You only have to stop forgetting. The truth is simple. You are already whole. You are already free. You are already home. You always have been. Thank you for walking this path with me. May you be well. May you be peaceful. May you be free. Good night, dear one. Until the next breath, the next step, the next remembering.